James Bunce, welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Hey Rob, how you doing? Pleasure to be here.
No, thank you very much. I think, not to make you blush, but looking at your CV and the things that you've done, and we've spoke a little bit, well, quite a bit over the last month or two, lining this up, an incredible CV with some incredible experiences across the world. So I'm super excited to learn a bit more about what these places are like to work in. So just on that, would you mind just giving us a brief overview of that CV? Because we're going to use that as a bit of a jumping off point to dive into each of the experiences, because I think each one is super unique. So yeah, over to you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me and thank you for the kind words. Landed on my feet and extremely lucky a lot of times. So I'll try to explain a little bit about how I got that luck. So yeah, started off my football career in Southampton. As many of us have, like doing an internship was my starting point. The club was very different than it is now. So there was a lot of turmoil in the club, administration, relegations. But after 7 years and a lot of changes in the club, I was able to move through the club from part-time to head of department. And in that time as well, Southampton went through a lot of changes in regards to going from League One, Championship, Premier League, and when I left, it was we finished like seventh in the Premier League. So quite a remarkable change around in the club and a beautiful club to learn and be in. Then I made the move after seven and a half years to go to the Premier League, so the organisation. Obviously, the EPPP was a growing kind of starting point. There was a lot of investment, and the Premier League wanted to invest in the area of high performance, develop a more specialised department to really kind of grow the performance medical support, advice, and collaboration amongst the clubs. So I was really lucky to get a job there based in London, obviously supporting the 20 clubs and the rest of the Category 1 clubs and 2 clubs. And after 3.5 years there, I got a really unique opportunity to move to the US. US soccer was going through its kind of redevelopment phase, wanting to modernize. A lot of money had come into it. Obviously, the MLS was growing alongside the US soccer part. And having an opportunity to move abroad was something I always wanted to do personally and professionally. So made the move to become the first high performance director that they had in US soccer. Again, blank kind of canvas job really. There were existing staff, but this new structure, this new process. And again, after about 3.5 years there, moved back to the UK. And within a month of moving back to the UK, I got an opportunity. Again, I thought I was going to move back to England, back to the island. But in reality, a month after landing, I got the opportunity to join a really exciting project in Monaco. Monaco, everyone knows it for good and bad reasons. But it obviously a very historic club with an amazing background. But it got into some turmoil around its, how it was being, run, and how the player development was becoming a bit of a problem. So it was kind of again a rebuild opportunity there with some amazing staff around me, some amazing leadership, and so. Took the jump and joined Monaco for again around 3.5 years. Again as performance director, overseeing the pro team, but also we had a small multi club compared to some, but we also had a team in Belgium that I also had to oversee called Cercle Bruges. So kind of getting that unique multi club aspect as well as concentrating on what is a very special and important club in France. So yeah, after 3.5 years and a lot of changes there, moved back to England, and this time I've been here more than a month, which is a good point, and decided to just take a little bit of reflection. Some cool opportunities have come up around some consulting, so I decided to set my own kind of consultancy up for the meantime. The biggest one of those is with San Diego FC, where a lot of my time is contracted to them. Becoming the 30th MLS franchise. If you haven't been, it's one of the most beautiful parts of the world. Really unique culture blend between obviously very much on the Mexico-US border. So you get this blend of culture, blend of football style and things like that. and to be a part of building a club from scratch. It's like every football manager's dream, they're on the computer game or something like that. It's that dream of building and influencing the decisions before they're even thought about. So being involved in that project with some real special people is again a really exciting part, and looking forward to that. So yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. I say it's been a magical mystery ride. I've always been one to take the jump if I felt it was the right thing, and I kind of put it through two lenses always, about cool people and cool projects. And if those tick the box, I'm never scared to take the jump or to try something new, because you only live once, and it's a small time that you're in this industry, so you should make the most of it as best you can.
I'm sure you have had the opportunity, but have you ever thought about doing the consultancy earlier? Or was it always a conscious? I only say that because there's more people going into this, the kind of consultancy arena at this, maybe your stage, or even a little bit later, a bit earlier. But was it a conscious decision to wait to do that? Was it always the plan to do that?
It was never a plan. Like none of this was ever a plan. I think anyone that can plan their career out, kudos to them. They're obviously killing it if they can do that. I think it's just reached a point where I wanted to be able to take a step back from the day to day in the short term, and guide in another way. It's actually ironically really challenging for me, because it's I've been in positions where you're in the heat of the battle, you're making the decisions every day, you're calling the shots, you're involved in that, and it's almost like you have to change your mindset a little bit and take a kind of, you are a consultant, you're there to advise, support, guide, influence, but you're not there to be the trigger puller. And so actually for me and my type of personality, that's actually quite a challenge for me, and something that actually is helping me grow to in a different way, from being in the heat of the battle all the time. But no, I wouldn't say it was a conscious decision. It was just opportunity. Again, I'd left Monaco, I was back in the UK, this opportunity to support San Diego, and some other little things came up, and I thought, well, again, it's a cool people, it's a cool project, it's a one in a lifetime opportunity to build a professional football club and a performance department with zero staff, zero standards, zero facility. So from that kind of perspective, it was a unique opportunity that I thought I've got to get involved in that.
One thing that I've always thought up until relatively recently, and I've had some insight from someone that I know who's in recruitment, and I'm interested to know all the moves that you've made. Not there's been loads of them, but there've been significant moves. Have these always been, and you can feel free to veto this and I'll edit it out later, but has it always been like job advert, apply, get it? Or has there been a link somewhere that's kind of helped along the way? Has there been a recruiter involved? I'm just thinking of a younger coach who goes, I'd love to do that, what James has done, but what are the steps? Do I just like keep refreshing UK Sport website until a job comes up? Or is there the work that I have to do to enable that to come to me, or make that transition a little bit easier?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a little bit of a mixed bag, really. So the US soccer one, they were looking for someone to help guide them of what does a performance director in Europe look like. So a mutual connection said, "Oh, speak to James, he'll help guide you." So my job there was just that, hey, this is what we do in the UK in performance director roles. This is what the structure usually looks like. And then it was like, okay, good luck, go and find your performance director. And that was it. I was really happy in the Premier League. It was a really enjoyable job. Wasn't even thinking about moving. And then 3 months later, they rang back and said, yeah, look, we tried and we haven't found one. Would you be interested in it? And originally I said no, but then I went and met them, and again, cool people, cool project. I kind of eventually said yes. So that was a bit of a mixed bag. Monaco was through connection, but then Premier League was more through process, about an application process. And then back to Southampton days, when I was going to get my foot through the door, I emailed and sent letters back in the day, to 30, 40 clubs saying, can I come in, shadow, clean the boots, fill the drinks
And what
bottles.
what year would that have been, James?
Goodness me, like 2007, 2008. Yeah, and just like sent them and only Southampton replied. Which was ironic because it was on my doorstep. I was living in Portsmouth at the time. And so again, trying to be proactive, just I'll do anything. I just want to be involved and got that opportunity. So I think nowadays you see a lot of the big roles. I go through recruiters. There's a lot of good recruiters out there now that know the market, know the people in the market, and so a lot of people are using the recruiters for the big roles. So again, a little bit of a mix match for me. So I can't really guide on refreshing UK sport all the time. I can only talk about myself. Whenever I advertise for a job, and this is the truth, I always put it to open market. Like otherwise you're really narrowing your vision of what's out there. I think it's really important that you look at different sports. I've always recruited different sports, different people from different cultures, because I think that's really important. And even if you land on someone that you thought was the right person, I think you've got to have a real open mind to what else is out there. And I think my experiences working in other countries has opened that even further, that there are amazing staff in France, there are amazing staff in the US. We have amazing staff in the UK, of course, but it's not the only epicenter for greatness in the field of medical and performance. And actually kind of exploring different markets, different sports, is something that I really value, because we have a lot of institutionalized football knowledge. Sometimes we need people from outside of that to break some of the traditions or practices in for a good reason and challenge the status quo. So I would always advocate for that. For example, in San Diego, we're going to be recruiting 15, 16 jobs, and all of those will be advertised with no one preset to get any of those jobs, because it's the right thing and we want to get the best staff who are available in the market.
And again, can dodge this. Would there also be a recruiter involved to help that process, or will you go direct?
I believe with my network in US and Europe, I will be able to manage that myself.
Okay,
I
nice.
say that I've never recruited 16 jobs in here. So I might regret that. I think we will do a lot of the heavy lifting on that ourselves, and knowing the kind of people that we want to be in the organization from a culture fit. I think if you have that ability, I think I'm quite comfortable doing that.
I don't want this to turn into a careers advice discussion, but I think there's so much there that we can unpack. So things have changed since 2007. Probably letters aren't written as much. Emails probably find their way into a junk folder because there's so many of them. What would your advice be to people who want to get on the journey that you've got on in 2024 from someone that is recruiting now?
Yeah, look, it's definitely changed. Like I was back in the day where it was working internship for free, and I know now for good reason rules have changed on that and things like that. I can only speak from me as a performance director in what I do. Is I love people that hustle. I love people that put themselves out there, that email me. So I'm sure there's someone that may listen to this that says he didn't reply to me, but I try to reply to everyone, no matter how bizarre the email is, or how it's not aligned, or they're not the right person. I try to always email and give advice, or take a meeting, or take a video call. Like I want to try to give that back if I can. Not because of a philanthropy part of my mindset, but just more that it is a struggle to get into this industry, and it's a beautiful industry to be in, and I'm privileged and lucky, and someone took a chance of opening my letter and reading it and reaching out to me. So I try to do that as best as I can. I'm sure I've missed things over the years, but where possible, I try to take that. I think so. My advice to people is hustle, is ask for meetings, is send emails, is send bodies of work, is where possible, hey, I've done some research on 1080 sprint. I'd love to show you how I've looked at that, and if it's applicable. Just try to get your face out there, and to meet people, because it might not be something I can directly help with in that moment, but I might know someone who knows someone who knows someone that might want someone in that role. So I would say, if you're waiting for it to land on your lap, you're gonna struggle. I think I've done a speech to people before of like, since every year there's like 10,000 sports science graduates in the UK. So every year you're against 10,000 people that probably want to get into professional sport. If you multiply that, since I've been in the industry, you're talking hundreds of thousands of graduates. So, you've got to make yourself different. You've got to hustle at university, try to get experiences, try to help with teams free, try to give your time, try to make your mistakes young so that you learn from them when you're older. But hustle and try to put your name in front of people, even if you get rejected, even if you don't get a response, which is sad sometimes. Keep going and keep pushing. Right,
this is my last careers advice.
No worries.
Question. Personal research that like people have done within their own environment, with one athlete they're working with on a Tuesday night, or with a lower league club, amateur club, semi-professional club, whatever it is. I love that idea, and it's something that I've spoke to people about in the past. For someone that probably gets a lot of emails, do people actually do that and reach out and say, here's a bit of work that I've done, whether it's an article or it's a little bit of research they've done individually, a case study? Are people actually proactive enough to send that to you to have a little look and get a bit of feedback? Or is it normally, do you know anyone who's got a job going?
No, you get on that
both
continuum, you get the both.
Okay.
So for me, hey, you got any jobs going, versus someone who's, hey, I've done this. It might not be applicable for you, but I'd love to show you. That's going to grab my attention more than just, oh, hey James, haven't spoken in 10 years. Have you got a job? That's not that's not really, again, I would respond, but it's not really going to grab my attention. And also, the reality is that amateur or individual athlete research isn't probably going to be applicable to my environment as a performance director of a professional football club, but it shows care, attention, drive, motivation. It shows that you are trying to do something, you're trying to be something. And I think for me, when recruiting, it's all about character, it's all about the person, it's all about, not me, but my staff, including me, can develop skills. We can develop how to do things, how to use GPS, how to, do things in the gym, but we can't build good people. Or you can, but it's harder to build good people. So showing that you have all those, you're resilient, you care, you want to put yourself out there, you want to, push and have that determination, ticks a lot of my human boxes before even beginning the recruitment. So I would always err on that's the best thing. And it doesn't have to even be hardcore research, publications. It could just be, hey, we're in Ramadan at the moment. Hey, this is how I've approached it with players that I've worked with. How do you do it? Like that, those types of questions really excite me, because I also can learn from that, and I can also challenge myself on my thoughts on those kind of things. So I think that's how I would gauge on it. I think you're gonna win the lottery if you think you can just email and say, hey, have you got any jobs going, and that leads to a job. I think that's a very unlikely direction. So I would always advocate for showcasing yourself, putting yourself forward in the best way that you can.
Great advice. And I promise my last one, so it will be. Going back to your time at Southampton, intern to head of department, head of sports science?
Head of athletic development.
Head of athletic development, okay. And you left when Poch was in charge, 6th or 7th. What was it about that time that made the club what it was, and so successful in terms of athletic development perspective? And feel free to touch on the other stuff as well, but I'm just interested to see what was at the core of that success.
Yeah, look, it was the traditional family club. I know that probably doesn't exist so much now, but every member of staff was so tight. We'd gone, and I think it was through adversity. We had got, we got relegated from Championship. We were into League One, started with minus 12 points because of administration. New ownership came in, and we were really like, there was months that we would sat around the board table. There's probably only 15 staff at the training ground, which sounds absolutely crazy now when you think of the staff that run and I'm talking that's academy and pro staff. There's like 15 of us, and it would be like, oh, you're not getting paid this month. We have to wait until we get some money coming in, and the adversity of dealing with that as a people, but still caring and pushing every day to win, to drive the players to push. And then it would be like, oh, we've sold Andrew Sermon, you get paid this month. And it's like, and like it's good and bad, because you're losing a quality player, but you get to pay your mortgage this month. So the adversity and people that stay in that moment, you're doing it for more than the job. You're doing it because you love what you're doing, you love the club, you love the people you're working with, and the camaraderie that comes through that dark times help build the beauty of what it ended up being. Obviously, we were helped by being bought by a Swiss billionaire, Markus Lieber, who unfortunately died before he got to see the realization of what he dreamt of. But I think the culture of the club was to win in our context, which is not like a mega club. We have to do things differently. We have to push the boundaries. We have to be willing to make mistakes, but trying to land on something that pushes us forward. And I think that was the mentality of everyone in the group, both performance, medical, but the club, that you could try things, and if it didn't work, it wasn't a big problem. It would be right, and okay, we find some other opportunities. So we were really early adopters of like GPS. We were really early adopters of internship programs, but proper internship, and interns from that program are now heads of department in other clubs, and things. So it's we really believed in that personal development, all kind of working together. And then we have the most amazing academy, and that academy probably kept Southampton. I don't know the financial state at the time, but from what I understood was we were on the brink of collapse. But that lifeline of talent kept us alive. And when I joined, my first session was the under 13s, and it was James Ward-Prowse, Luke Shaw, Harrison Reed, Callum Chambers, like all in that. And the year above was Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. The year a few above was Adam Lallana. It was there were, and obviously above that Gareth Bale. Like it was a unique time to see that development. And for me as a young practitioner, to see and be able to work with that talent, but be able to make mistakes, be able to build things collaboratively was so amazing. And I think that's how we kind of looked at the whole thing, was how can we influence our players, how can we make them better, how can we do things differently, because we're going to need to do, because we don't have the financial support that some clubs do.
Interesting. So obviously it helps to get good kids in your academy and keep them, but in terms of developing them, was there anything that you did in the academy, again on a budget, probably on a minus budget because the state of the club financials, was there anything that you were playing around with that when you look back, we nailed that was something that we stuck with, we believed in, and brought us real success?
I think again, I can't speak for every other club at that time of what they were doing, but we had a very early vision that they're football players, but they're also like athletes, and we need to develop them athletically, especially if they're in. Southampton was a good example. This Monaco is actually also a good example. They're in the first team. Alex was 17. Theo Walcott was 16, I think. So they have to be athletically robust, resilient, strong, powerful, quick at a young age, because they're going to be playing adult football. So again, we as a club had a philosophy that they should be doing a lot of activations, preparations, physical development techniques. We those were embedded, and we were probably doing it. I can't say this is 100. We're probably doing a lot more athletic development training sessions on top of football sessions or bespoke to football sessions, knowing that the athleticism of these players is going to be really key. I think it's now more seen across the whole industry that, you have to be a football player, you have to be a superb athlete. You can't really get away with that luxury player now that doesn't move, doesn't press, doesn't recover, doesn't sprint. The positional changes of fullbacks, everything that we now know. I think we were, it's not a term I use a lot, but ahead of the curve in that, and for seeing that we had a need analysis was these kids need to be ready to play elite football at 16, 17, 18, 19, and therefore football talent alone isn't going to be enough in League One and the Championship, where it's very physical and very very athletic. So we invested a lot in that, and we invested a lot of time in that. We were also a club, again, we can touch on it later, but like with giving people time. So Alex Chamberlain, for example, he was physically underdeveloped through maturation. So we took a step back with him to move, to create environments where he could be successful and grow into the player that he is now. So we were always willing to do that. But I think the major thing was the focus on the focus that we had on physicality. And then at the end, with Maurizio, that kind of is the final part of that, where his demands on the players were exactly where we were in the Premier League at that point. He demanded that physicality, but it wasn't a problem, and that's why so many of the young players played for him, like Alex, like Ads, like Callum, like Luke, because they had that physicality available to them. And so yeah, I say there was no magic sauce or magic kind of. It was just that we kind of really, as a club, focused on physical development, but also technical, tactical development, and there was a real equal kind of share of that.
Brilliant. I'd love to take this little piece into your next role, which was with the Premier League. And again, I feel like I'm saying it all the time, but feel free to navigate this politically. When you went in, because obviously a lot of your role, or all of your role, was in the academy system within the Premier League and Cat 1 clubs. What was your perception of what was going on at the time, thinking back? Was it something that you went in and you obviously had lots of insight without being positioned in a club? You had this kind of overseeing eye, been visiting clubs and seeing what was going on. Were you encouraged with what was going on? Or was it, I didn't realise that people were not doing this? Or, at the time, and what year was it? Just remind us what year that was.
Oh, goodness. I think something like 2015, something like 2016.
Okay. So it's nearly 10 years ago.
Yeah,
so obviously a lot has changed. But I'm just keen to get a bit of an insight of what things were like at that particular time.
Yeah, I think first of all, you have to realise when you change to a league job or a federation job, and that's why it's interesting that I've kind of done club, league and federation, you have to pivot your mindset to what you are and what you're doing. In the club, it's every day. You are making the decisions. You are developing the players. You are, deciding how you do strength training, how you do integration of pitch rehab. You are the decision maker of that. There is no requirement you do it in a certain way. You have to internally make that decision. At a league level, you develop zero players. You as in you are not developing them. So you have to pivot your mindset to what is this and what can you do for the game. And so quite quickly I was able to, what I can do is try to raise all the standards. Again, not saying that everyone needed that, but that's part of my job. I can raise all the standards. I can support individuals. I can support clubs. But the whole thing is, if we raise all the standards, the product gets better, the players get better, the TV revenue gets sold for higher amounts. We recruit better players from abroad to supplement that, and all the things that go with that. But I was actually really encouraged. Generally, what you do learn, and you have to humble yourself a lot, is there's more than one way to develop a player. There's more than one way to physically, mentally, tactically, technically develop a player. And if you go in with a mindset of, they don't do it like we did at Southampton and we got loads of success at Southampton, then you're ignorant and a little bit stupid, because there is, in my belief, more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to get to that end point. But I think that the EPPP probably got a lot of bad press originally around, rule books and things like that, and rules, and this is what you've got to do. And it felt, I think, for some clubs restrictive, but actually, I think now you're seeing the benefit of the professionalization of the standards, because if you look at how England are developing players now, I think it's the envy of a lot of the world, and France may be the other one. But
I'm just going to jump. Just going to
yeah,
jump in there. Sorry, mate. Just while I've got it on mind, do you think that was the case because? And I was in there in a League One / Championship club,
yeah,
lower end Championship club at the time, and we had issues, or they had issues. The technical coach in the academy had issues with the EPPP because they were probably older coaches who were used to doing it their way, not probably used to doing a lot on like a laptop. It was all written down, and just them kind of logistical, generational issues were present at that time. Do you think that was one of the big barriers? And now we're kind of 10 years on, we've got maybe a new generation of coaches coming through who are more adapt to them kind of challenges.
yeah. Look, when you make a big change, there's going to be collateral damage, or there's going to be people that don't agree with it, and that's like that's normal in organizations. You can, if you try to please everyone, you will fail, and you cannot please everyone. And I have a lot of respect for the decisions the Premier League made about trying to professionalize it and to modernize it, and to, you know, going back to your specific question, should coaches record and monitor what they do with players? Yes. Should you write it down? Should you plan it? Yes. Like, so if you haven't been doing that for 30 years, that doesn't mean that's the right way of doing it. Could have there been support, a softener way to build to that change? Maybe that might be a reflection. I've not been in those meetings, but that might be a reflection of the 10-year review of the Triple P. Okay, did we hard launch it too hard? Should we soft launch it? Should we give in computer support and literacy support for coaches that needed it? But overarchingly, again, just my belief from being in a club when the EPPP launched, we weren't actually worried, because we felt, well, we're doing this. We're so we did have more staff than they were suggesting. They did have the right qualifications. We did have recording of sessions. We did, so for us it wasn't a problem. And I think if it's such a problem, that's probably a little bit of a red flag, of maybe the organization needs to change. But I think that's where I felt that I didn't want to look at it as a rule book kind of thing. There was a rule book, and I'm sure that got spoken about in clubs a lot, and it's probably the stick rather than the carrot. And I always looked at it as in, like, well, how can I be the most useful person for all these organizations to raise the standards and to offer support, guidance, rather than, oh, you must do it because if I get my rule book out, it says in chapter 8.3 you must do this. And so myself and my boss Dan Hunt, who was the head of Elite Performance, really kind of went on this mission to just try to build relationships, build connections, and because there were so many good people, good things going on in clubs, how can we get everyone to align on some standards, align on some programs, align on sharing, and realizing you're not giving away the golden secrets because that you're all doing the same thing, and to push those standards higher, together. So we kind of looked at it from that mindset rather than a rule book. This is the only way to do it. We wanted to we called it like give the club their DNA, let them do it their way, but also have some minimum expectations that would raise the game and the quality and the principles of performance and medicine.
So you mentioned there about certain accreditations and qualifications that you were happy to follow the rule book because you guys had those things in place anyway at Southampton. But when you went to the Premier League, there was a stipulation that was it just category one, potentially category two, that practitioners had to be working towards or have basic accreditation or be on the basis accreditation pathway. What was the reason for that? Why was it just bases and not other accrediting bodies that were out there? And what was the feedback initially on that from a Premier League perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think first of all, so this wasn't in the rule book. It
Okay,
was later added.
right.
So I think I think there was a personal feeling that it could descend into the wild, wild west if we didn't accredit some way or quality control the performance, sports science staff that enter the organizations. I think in medicine they had clear accreditations for physios, for doctors, expectations, but for sports science and performance there wasn't any accreditation. And the danger is there. Then people, and I don't mean this, they go to the lowest common denominator, which is, oh, you must have a sports science degree. Oh, you've got a sports science degree, you can work in this Cat 1 club. And there's a danger there that one, you undervalue the industry because having a sports science degree doesn't qualify you to work with elite players or football players. And then you end up, which I think you've been involved in heavily, and kudos to you, is like you get salaries that are disproportionately valued. So you get, head of sports science, need a sports science degree, 17,000 a year. It's not professionalizing the environment. So we thought, how can we do this? We didn't just go, oh, basis, that's the answer. We thought about how we wanted this to look. In my honest opinion, so again, showing my age, I'm a cohort of the FA Fitness Trainers Award at Lilleshall. And for all that probably needed tweaking, it at least set a standard or an accreditation pathway for physical performance fitness staff in the industry, both to learn, to share it with other colleagues, but to get accredited. And unfortunately, there was no appetite in the FA at that point, and I think still to this moment, to kind of develop a performance pathway. And I still think it would be really cool if someone did that, like, and they are the official kind of course directors of football.
Is it UEFA now, James, who are taking that mantle, and the FA
Exactly.
and other associations will adopt it? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So, but I thought there was an opportunity. Again, we had people who were in clubs coming in to teach us, guide us. There was a proper process. I thought it was an enjoyable, challenging process. But there wasn't anything at that point that we could latch onto. We did speak to them about help managing that and setting that up, but it just wasn't going to happen in time, or wasn't going to happen. So we looked at that. We also fully advocate for people doing, UKSCA, NSCA, all the other badges, accreditation pathways that people wanted. But what we felt we wanted to see was a process where it was graded. So there was people who were beginning their careers, people who were the elite or the top tier of their careers from experiences, from practice, to try and have a differentiation between the market value of those two groups. And we felt the basis accreditation with some tweaks to football could be a cool way that we can get people to do reflective practice, get people to be observed, get people to be mentored, get people to be, supported through that pathway by other practitioners. And so we felt that it was at least a starting point to differentiate between just a graduate and someone that is applying practical delivery. So we kind of partnered or spoke with bases, and again, for them there's no money involved in apart from the process. It's not like we paid them money to have the that pathway. It was more about wanting something that practitioners could follow. I went around in that time and spoke to some of the leaders, who were in that period, like Struds, Ryder Morgan, Sam Erith. I went and spoke to these people and said, hey, what do you think about this pathway? Again, they wouldn't have to do it, because they were in the pro, and they all kind of appreciated it and said that they would help internally and externally, mentor if needed and things like this. So we ended up going through that process and yeah, landed on bases as the one that we wanted people to follow. Obviously, we spoke to the heads of departments at the academies and Cat Ones, and again, they agreed. And then eventually it was written into rule through the shareholders, through the club ownership. So then it became a requirement. I again, maybe head in the sand. I didn't hear a lot of bad feedback on it. I think people find it challenging, which was pleasing because it shouldn't be a gimme. Otherwise, it's probably not worth its salt. But I think people felt it was a process that they could really get involved in. They could try to challenge themselves and try to do reflective practice, which isn't always an easy thing to do when you're in a club day to day working so hard. You might come back now and say, "Oh, I've got 100 people that thought it was awful."
I definitely don't. Don't worry.
So I might have to eat my words, but no, it's. But just to be clear, that doesn't also distinguish you as, oh, you've got bases. Okay, move on. Your life of development is complete. We advocate for all courses, to develop yourself, to develop specialized skills, whether that's in screening, whether that's in strength and conditioning, whether that's in academia. The more we learn, the more we share, the more we challenge ourselves, the better we'll be. But we wanted to almost just have a base level, similar for the physios. Having a physio accreditation doesn't mean you're, but it's a base level. It's something to say that's the minimum expectation. But there was that for coaching, there was that for medicine, and there was not that for physical performance science. So we felt that we had to do something there.
This is opening up in a massive can of worms. Maybe not for today. But although it's the elite player performance pathway, so the pathway emphasising the pathway that it is for the player rather than the first team, why aren't these kind of things in place for first team staff as well as academy staff?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the reason why is probably because it's the Premier League, for all that people might have issues with it, don't make the rules. They can suggest rules, and then it's a shareholder vote. So they'll vote on the length of grass, they'll vote on the amount of substitutions, they'll vote on concussion substitute, they'll vote on everything, and it's the 20. They all have a equal proportion of that vote. I think from a first team, whilst I would advocate for sure, again, it's the highest level. You do see a lot of changes in management, which a lot of clubs bring in fitness coaches from abroad or fitness coaches that are affiliated to a head coach. Again, not the methodology I would say, but it happens, and and the turnover of coaches is significant. So I think it would be difficult to demand, oh, hey, Pep Guardiola, you're coming to Man City, but you can't bring this guy because he hasn't got the basis accreditation. I think we'd lose more than we'd gain in that kind of argument. So I think it's about having it there, about trying to support all clubs, but I don't think we can ever get to a point where it will be mandated within the first teams.
Yeah, you mentioned the manipulation of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's development in terms of moving him down because of his growth and maturation, and that's a big thing for you. So that, given your work in the area, so why was that such a big thing to take to the Premier League, and what did you do whilst there to kind of push that them thoughts around biobanding specifically forwards?
Yeah, look, it was just amazing learning moment for me. So I love those kind of times where you just learn something you never thought you'd learn. So yeah, quick background: Alex was an under 14 and typical late maturer. So not that we had the measurements, we had the growth and maturation, the Karmas Roche method. We didn't have any of that. You could just see his voice hadn't broken. He didn't have any kind of facial hair. He looked smaller physically than his his counterparts in his age group. So you could see he was delayed in his maturation. But when he played with those under 14s, he struggled. Like he couldn't get on the ball. He couldn't run as fast. It just obvious to your eyes. And I've reflected on like when I played rugby as a kid. I had mates that were amazing, and then when became awful. It's such an obvious thing when you reflect on it. That guy at school was amazing. Where did he go? Nowhere. And so you start to think about it like that. But Alex, when you saw him individually, on skills, on passing, on shooting, on things that didn't require combat or the collisions or physicality, he was the best or one of the best. And you saw that in the testing that he did from a technical perspective, all that stuff. He was top, but put him in a game and he'd go missing. And so the problem at the stage at that point was, when you're an under 14, you went into a dual age group. So you'd go to under 15, 16. It wasn't a 15 and then a 16. It was 15, 16. And he was struggling in the under 14s. So if you put him in the under 16s, essentially, the challenge would be even greater for him. But yet you've got this amazing player. And that's where, again, this club mindset of, well, how can we do this differently? Because Alex in another club, I can't say this would happen, but he could have just been not good enough at 14. Thank you. See you later. Unlucky. That's the way it goes.
The classic too small.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Too small, not physical enough. Sorry, you're never going to make it. The stories that we hear, over and over again. But lucky at that point, we had, a great academy director, Matt Crocker, who then went on to the FA and is now at US Soccer. But he kind of embraced this. Okay, but let's try to formulate a plan with Alex and his family where he stays back for a period in the under 14s. And then when he goes through this growth, we'll assess him and see how he does. It wasn't a guarantee that, he grows, he's going to be a top player, but it makes more sense than to just not take that extra 6-12 months to observe it. We lose nothing. And so we did that. His dad was an ex-player, tremendous player. His mum was a physio. So those conversations weren't as hard as some parents that might now think, well, if they don't make that exact progression with their age group, they're done, they're never going to make it. They were super open-minded, great people who had their son's best interests at heart. And so that's what we did with Alex. And then we gave him support. We trained him sometimes up with the 15s to get the challenge and the 16s, but then came down so he could showcase his skills with the 14s. It was wasn't something that was programmed, but we just moved him as we saw fit. And then it was crazy. He literally went on this unbelievable run of development physically. He filled out, Alex, he's not a massive guy, but he filled out, he's stocky, he's powerful. And he suddenly went from like not being in the under 16s to playing in League One and obviously being an immense player and having a great career to the point that he's had now. And so that got me Alex was the most obvious example you could ever see with your naked eyes. It was night and day. It was clear he needed help. But it kind of got me asking questions internally at Southampton first. How many other Alexes do we have in Southampton? And then when I got to the Premier League, how many Alexes are there in the Premier League or the academy system? There's loads. We know the data of how football is recruited. The big, strong kids that score 15 goals in a game are the winners, and the kids that look smaller and are less involved are the ones that don't get recruited. So we know that there's that bias. So luckily at the Premier League, but also at Southampton, we had the Bath Satellite Centre, so we had connections with Bath University. Sean Cummings now is probably the world's most renowned expert in this area. We early had relationships with him from Southampton to Bath to look at how can we measure growth and maturation, how can we kind of formalize processes to identify these kids. And then when you're at the Premier League, you can put that plus, like then it opens more doors to more people wanting to do things. So I was lucky to set up an advisor group with Bob Molina, who's the grandfather of growth and maturation, Sean Cummings, Rodri Lloyd, John Oliver, Amanda Johnson, all these amazing people who specialize in this area. And what we just did with the clubs was provided free education. Again, my job isn't to say, oh, you need to do growth and maturation. It was, hey, clubs, these are all the experts. Come, we're going to put you on your ISAC course so you can measure correctly. We'll pay for that. Here's the expertise. We'll pay for that. Come to the meetings, learn what you want to learn, and apply it how you want to apply it. There's no rule of you must do growth and maturation. If you, as an expert, which I was in my club, feel this could benefit your players, take it. If you think it's awful, then don't take it. It's not a requirement. And so we kind of got through that process, and then biobanding gets talked about probably the most, but it's probably the least important part in my opinion. It's the cherry on the top because that's the games program, but that's one part of it. It's about all the things that are happening in your club day to day that are the most important. So identifying them, challenging them, training them, manipulation of strength and conditioning programs, going through peak height velocity, going through adolescent awkwardness. How do you change their programming and things like that? But we ended up putting on the first ever biobanded tournament, just almost like to draw attention to it, to be the bomb drop, to show that this is how it looks, this is how different you can have an under 14 that's playing in the under 16s, and you can have an under 16s that's playing in the under 14s, and it doesn't ruin football. It just showcases how they can all grow at different rates. And so we put that one on at Southampton. Again, my connections there, it was easy to do. So we had 4 clubs involved in that. And the remarkable thing about all that gets lost in a lot of the talk is how much the kids appreciated it. How we had independent people interview them after, the early maturers, the late maturers, and they both found it an actually really beneficial experience. They could talk and identify why this was helpful for them. But for me, there is no end point of growth and maturation. It's just an education. It's then over to the clubs. How do you think this can work in your environment? If you don't do biobanding, you're not stupid. You're not failing. If you but the biggest change it's had, I hope, after the many years it's gone, is that people just are having a cognizant thought about, hey, he might not be struggling because he's slow and not agile. He might be struggling because he's just lacking in growth and maturation. Let's not throw this kid on the scrap heap because of physical attributes that we know will be advancing through his development anyway. And so what I hope, if anything, the work that's happened is, one, we've provided clubs with expertise and systems, but 2, we've created a huge amount of awareness to scouts, to talent ID, to coaches, to medics, to physical staff, that it's a super, super common issue in all sports. And just to have a second thought about things before making assumptions on very young people about their qualities as a football player when you don't know probably the biology that's going on inside them. So that's kind of my sales pitch. But I say it was great ability at the Premier League to supercharge that and to push that support, and I say support, education, and things like that to all the clubs. And then, like I said, their DNA, their club culture, their club expertise can take it in different ways. Some took it even further. Some probably didn't look at it at all. But that's their own decision once they've got the education and the expertise to make that decision.
So I know you said the biobanding part is the tournament part, match play part, the cherry on the cake. But are those kind of tournaments still going on?
Yeah, I believe so. And the great thing is that after we ran tournaments, clubs were ringing up individual clubs saying, hey, we've got a free weekend this weekend. Can we host a biobanded game? We want to do that. So I think I remember like QPR and Southampton did that a few times, and I think Reading and a few others. Like that for me is, yeah, they have a free. They are making that expert choice themselves. I don't think, to my knowledge, but it's not something again I follow religiously every day. I don't think there's been Premier League led ones, but I might be wrong on that. Again, whatever direction people take, it's completely fine. I just think it's now down to the clubs, and as I said, the 90% of the time is the stuff that you're doing in your club, how you're training them, how you're assessing them, how you're making decisions if they keep their contract or they get released. Those are the things that I hope have changed more than we play a biobanded tournament every 6 weeks. That for me was never the end goal. Probably got distracted. Some people got distracted by that and thought, "Oh, you're trying to change the whole football pyramid of this." Especially when we did it in America, it was even more challenging to get parents to realize, no, 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 it's not the change of the system. It's just an ability to manipulate it when you want. So that would be my biggest hope, that it's more of a educational change than a kind of structural change.
We've got loads to go, and we're nearly an hour in. So apologies for keeping you here, but we'll carry on. One last thing about the Premier League role: national fitness testing.
Yeah.
When I was in a club, we used to have Nike in to do the Spark testing.
Yeah.
And then obviously you guys took that over and went out and got a company to deliver that. What was the thought behind that, and what benefits has that given the Premier League and the clubs that continues to happen?
Yeah, look, so this was a different one than the basis. This was in the rule book when we walked through the door. Not sure if I should say this, but I'll say it. Like, would I put that into rule if it wasn't? I probably wouldn't. I'm not sure I would.
What, the fact that kids need testing a certain amount of times a year? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would. But it was in the rule book, and that means it was voted by the owners, so we delivered it. The only reason why I say that is because there's so many nuances that come into testing young athletes, that what is your end point of having that data? What is your end use? And so this is again.
So what was the end use?
Yeah, I think it was to show an under 13 does 5 meters in this speed, and under 14 does it in this, but it's going to do this. They're going to get quicker when they get older. It's so for me, again, sounds corny, but every day is a testing day in a club these days. You know, they're doing groin bars, they're doing jump testing, they're doing growth and maturation testing. You know, every GPS is worn every day. 1080 sprints are being, you know, everything is being tested every day. So I don't think there's this feeling like, oh, clubs weren't testing, so we need to show them how to do testing. But it was there, and we worked with the clubs to say, okay, you're doing this amount of testing. What can we agree on that everyone should do for mutual benefit to be able to see how we're physically developing against others? And we came up with the small battery test. Then again, the Premier League, we paid for all the equipment. So we gave new equipment to everyone. We paid Guy Parkin and his group to come in and independently verify, because if you've never done a yo-yo test in a club, it's so hard to get people to do it honestly and to do it without bias. So to be fair to Guy and his team, they ran that really well, and there was super good adaptation of that. And I think today, that again, it's a credit to the clubs and to the system. It's still running. I think the coolest part actually on the national fitness testing was that, going back to growth and maturation, we integrated growth and maturation into the testing, because again, if you're only looking at it chronologically, well, if I'm at club X and my under 13s are slower than club Y, well, I could have loads of late maturers, early maturers. So it's not even real data at that point. So, like, okay, my under 13s are slower than that team's under 13s, but all ours are on a different periodization. They're on a different growth and maturation status. So there's so much nuance that goes into it. I wouldn't be crying into my cornflakes if my team was slower than another team. But again, we integrated the growth and maturation, so you should look at biological ages rather than just chronological. So you kind of got a better look at it that way. But for me, again, what it did show is that there is, despite this, you know, this we're playing each other for 3 points every week, there was this willingness for teams and clubs to combine to do things together. And we're not going to talk about it long, but I think on the other side, the national injury surveillance one was a really important one for me, and that was again in rule, because that adds value. Okay, we're training kids at under 9, under 10. These are young people. we don't have a overview of how many injuries are happening, what type of injuries, what's causing them. And then the idea of that project was to first of all understand the landscape. What's happening? What type of injuries are we getting in youth football? What type of prevalence is it? What type of severity is it? And then the idea of that was obviously clubs would see themselves how they're doing against the national benchmark, but also we were then going to, okay, if we found that we had loads of groin issues in under 14s, we would be able to start to look at that in more detail through either education of groin pain management, or to investigate, well, why is that happening? Is it the games program? Is it too much training? Is it the training hours are too much at that age? So we wanted to kind of, eventually I'd left at this point, but that was the idea, that we wanted to then use the data to inform practice. And I think when you are training young players at 9 years old and below, you have a duty of care to the families, to the players, um, to manage injuries and to make sure that you've got nothing crazy going on within your system that you might regret at a later date. And that was again, be it the beauty of the Premier League, it wasn't the James Bunce and Dan Hunt show. We went out and worked with Dr. Colin Fuller, who's on all the rugby epidemiology studies. He worked with Extrand on the UEFA studies, and he ran it as an independent person working directly with the clubs. We resourced it, we managed it with the clubs, and that was kind of the spirit. Going back to how I entered it, I was like, I want to just put experts and people in front of the club so we all get better. And that for me was the injury space project versus the national fitness testing one was a more important one for us to launch and get going.
Perfect. So much stuff in there that I think people will be interested in knowing from the process about, the HPP mainly. So super interesting. Right, let's move on to the US soccer piece, and then we'll hit Monaco, and then I promise I'll let you go. So the move to US soccer, and we chatted before, and it was bringing the European high performance model to the US. What was the current state of things over in the US, and why did they want to adopt that, and what is that? What is that high performance model?
Yeah, so like I say, it was kind of a strange way to get there. Originally, it was just to help them identify the type of role. The US does take a lot of influence from European football, and not being arrogant as it should, because it's so defined and so robust here, and clear programs and clear output. So there was a feeling in US soccer that they wanted to be an early adapter of, having a department that's dedicated to, the care and the support services associated to the player. And they saw that that's what was happening in Europe. Back in the day, it wasn't in Southampton, but back in the day, you had medical staff, you had performance staff, and as much as they coexisted, they weren't kind of interlinked as much as they are nowadays. And you'd always get that, the performance staff break them, we fix them, and we just go on this magical mystery tour of that continuation. But then good clubs, good organizations realize that to bring these amazingly different specialisms under one house and getting them to coexist, challenge each other in a good way, would move everything forward. And that's why you see now in most Premier League clubs, they're doing amazing things in this space, with this coexistence, co-collaboration work that's going on. And for me, again, bias, I think it's so logical. I think there is conflict, there is difference of opinion, but you realize very soon that's where the magic happens. That's where you challenge your ideas, you challenge the way you're doing things, and to not have those people in a safe environment to work together, I think you're always going to have a worse service. So again, you see now the big influence of, in the MLS, there's a lot of staff, high performance directors now that have come from the European market or worked in big European clubs that are overseeing those departments. But US soccer, to be fair to them, had a really big growth mindset on this. We're like, okay, we've got the world's best women's team. We've got American soccer that's growing, players starting to go to Europe and play at the highest level. How do we make sure that when they come to US soccer, they have the best services available, that they don't come from, at that time, like Christian was at Dortmund and things, they don't come to US soccer and go, oh, it's so much better in my club. That's not what they wanted. So they wanted to build an organization that was modern, that had all the support services at high level integrated. And so my job was to do that. I came into an organization that had a few staff full time, but a lot of it was part time staff. Like, come in for the 2 week camp, go off and go into their own environments again. And again, that's kind of, for me, was a systematic of showing that it's just like put on a camp and leave, and there's nothing to do in between that. There's nothing about communication with the clubs, support of the clubs and the player transition in and out. There's nothing about building our standards collectively, building processes out before the camp, identifying the camp and making sure it's the best facilities, we've got the best services, how we're going to travel there, all the things that actually come around just coming to a camp are as important as the camp. So we wanted to, a big part of it was, okay, I come in, reflect what's going on, and then build out the performance department, which was medicine, sports science, performance, nutrition, psychology, and analysis at that time, and start to hire out experts that were full time in that environment to oversee it. So that was the thing. From a personal perspective, the opportunity to work within the women's game was a huge drive for me, actually, to go there. I'd obviously been Southampton and Premier League, and to get to work with, without doubt, the best women's team on the planet, where the second 11 was probably the second best team on the planet, was a unique opportunity, and I loved that, that environment, and to try to learn from the female expertise that we had in the building, the specialisms that are required in the female sport, and the considerations of that was an immense pride, but also immense learning curve for me, and something that I actively was a big part of why I wanted to go to the US, to try to see that, and to, where I could, add some value to an already outstanding program.
And
Yeah.
what year was that, James?
2017.
Okay, so obviously women's football over there was big anyway, because the stature of the national team. But that seems to be the start of the kind of slowly growing and now booming women's football across the world.
Yeah, you see you see like the games now happening. It's crazy. I watched the Man United women's derby at the weekend, and the amount of fans, the quality of play, it's unbelievable. So yeah, I think that was always the US's challenge, is everyone's going to close the gap because of investment, because of care of the game now, and focus on the game, and the support around the clubs, especially in the Premier League now. The investment that's going into that still needs to happen more, still needs to grow more, but that gap is closing. And how do you stay ahead of that curve? Obviously, culturally, soccer for females in the US is massive at college level, at youth level. It's such a big sport. But that's the challenge now for the US, is how do you keep ahead? And yeah, it's an exciting time for female sport in general. But football is growing so big now, and something that's great to be a part of it in that moment.
Right, let's finish off next 5 minutes with Monaco.
Yeah,
home for a month.
Yeah,
didn't know it was coming up. It comes up, and what a cool place to go! Like we chatted about beforehand, what a cool, unbelievable place to live.
Yeah, unbelievable, but has its own challenges.
Of course.
Yeah, because it's such a unique place. It's full of temptations for young multimillionaire players, and you have to make sure that you have a really strong culture of work and expectation in the club. I think Monaco taught me the most about, if you want to make real change, you need, real change, not little bits, but systematic change. The leadership that you work for needs to be super good and aligned. And look, I again, it's like it's a dream to do it. Like I was there with Paul Mitchell as the sporting director, who's arguably the best sporting director in the world at the moment.
And
History
where's
of
Paul now, James?
he's enjoying some well-deserved rest.
Okay.
Before I'm sure he'll take on another adventure. But yeah, to work with someone that's been involved in such an amazing recruitment, but what I hadn't seen is how detailed, and he chased relentlessly perfection in every area from all the staff. And then on the other side, the technical director was Lawrence Stewart, who's now the sporting director at Chelsea. So to be working with those guys every day, and us all taking this kind of camaraderie but ethic to push the changes, it was a remarkable environment. So just to paint the picture, Monaco obviously